The development is totally out of character with the surrounding buildings. Brent Council has not told us what precedents they're using to grant this permission. This site is within the not within the priority area BH2, but falls within BH4, which states, quote, greater weight will be placed on the existing character of the area. So I'd like to know how that's been done. The development does not benefit the majority of Brent residents. There's no section 1 and 6, some vague comment that we may look at it in the future at some unspecified date. That is not good enough. Brent Council yesterday, I read an article where they boast they build the most homes in London. Well, this development will not bring down the 25,000 plus homeless people. This development will not decrease our spending on temporary accommodation. But it may, if we do it properly with social and affordable housing, we may well look at ways of reducing our 13 million overspent. A smaller development any development should have been car-free. There are 6 stations within this proposed development served by the Underground, British Rail, and the Chilterns. The shortest walk is 0.7, which is a 15-minute walk. The longest is 1.2 miles, which is a 26 minutes walk. If this go ahead in its present form, the precedent that Brent Council has not convinced me of will be this building. And so when Formula One or Enterprise comes along and say, we want to sell, that will be the precedent. I would urge the committee, please, listen to the residents. None of the residents want this. I will ask you to consider putting the residents over profits and over your political decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could stay in your seat, there may be questions. Actually, are there any questions? Okay, no, there aren't. So, but there was always that possibility. So, thank you, and please take your seat.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I understand next speaker Keith Perrin may not be able to deliver his remarks. So, I believe his I believe wife will read out the remark. Keith will answer questions. Is that correct? If you two could please take a seat on that basis. And as with all of the speakers, you'll have 3 minutes, which begin as soon as you start.
Okay, well, for the purpose of this, I'm Keith Perrin, representing Sudbury Court Residents Association. We're restricting it to planning policy and the stuff in the report only. This 5-storey, 19-metre high building is in a setting and the character of 2-storey properties, typically 9 metres in height, and a small number of properties having dormers in the pitch roof. This proposal by design and massing is completely contrary to BH4, D4 and DMP1. It's especially so because it's just a few yards from the conservation area and viewable from many locations therein. Also, it's extremely visible to residents exiting the conservation area via their primary egress. To quote from the report, scale of the development. The scale and massing of the proposed development is larger than the surrounding context. It represents a departure from policy BH4. One could reasonably consider that this departure warrants the refusal of planning permission. This is not a priority location. It's in BH4, which states when determining the intensity of development, greater weight will be placed on the existing character of the area, access to public transport, which is poor, the variety of social infrastructure easily accessible on foot. This is our last piece of community infrastructure. Far from greater weight being given, less and indeed no weight has been applied to these policy requirements. Why is it okay to virtually ignore BH4? On amenity, points 71 and 72 in the report, 33% of the units don't comply with BRE sunlight exposure assessment and 25% don't comply with BRE illuminance. The report notes concerns. However, it goes on to dismiss these policies. The proposed development has windows pointing in all directions. It includes north-facing units where sunlight is limited, and non-compliance in relation to sunlight and daylight is apparently acceptable because it's an inevitable consequence of having balconies. These dark units are a failure of design and acknowledged as such by the urban design officer. The proposal does not comply with policy BD1. 6.1.1 expects all new development to embrace principles of good design and positively respond to the character of Brent's places. So why is this okay? Affordable housing, financial viability assessment shows a deficit between 868,000 and 1.6 million. To reach an affordable housing threshold, build costs would have to reduce and private sales achieve an increase of over 10%. This is in a falling market, so the Section 106 is completely useless. Page 5 says the principal reason for this lack of viability is the high existing use value relative to expected sales value of the proposed development. The valuation report makes clear why the benchmark land value is so high, because the existing business is very profitable. Page 6 of the valuation report states, we've arrived at an opinion of fair maintainable trade of 1.25 million and a fair maintainable operating profit of 325,000, which reflects a conversion rate of 26%. So why is it okay to have no affordable housing contribution in this area? Policy BSI 1, Mumbai Junction is very popular. It's demonstrated by the number of visitors 7 days a week. To quote the words—
Sorry, that's coming to time. If you could just finish the sentence you're on, please.
Sorry, well, it's not mine, so okay. Well, the words on the Mumbai, I want to just say this is an item of social infrastructure. The definition of social infrastructure is not exclusive, and this has evolved to meet the needs of a culturally diverse population.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, I do have to hold everyone's time. It's only fair on everybody else. Councillor Mahmood, I believe, has a question. So I know it's a bit confusing, but obviously Mr. Perrin will answer the question. So we do our very best to accommodate speaker needs, but yeah, go ahead and address the questions to him and he will answer them.
Thank you very much. Kate, can I ask you, the highest point of this development is going to be 5-story, 18.6 meters. I know it's much taller than the surrounding properties, which are mostly 2 and 3 stories. But the highest point or the tallest building will be in the middle of the development. Do you think that would make much difference to the other properties at the right and left?
The properties that you pinpoint as being 3 stories are actually 2 stories with dormers in their pitched roofs. The main frontage of this proposed building is basically 4 stories with a lump in the middle, with a lump on top of that, which is the lift shaft, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't provide affordable housing, because it's so expensive to build. Does that sort of answer your question?
Any further questions? No. Okay, on that basis, we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you. I mean, obviously, we all know this development in a fair amount of details. We looked at it before, so some of those questions, clarification, have already been asked and answered in August. Councillor Lawber is our next speaker, who will also have 3 minutes. If you could come to the microphone, please. Maybe we just take one, pass it down. That'll be the quickest way to do that, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a resident of the Sudbury Court estate. I'm some way away from the Mumbai Junction, so I don't have a direct interest, but I do live in a conservation area and I do know what impact this will have. I have a slight issue in that officers did not introduce the procedure for dealing with this, and assuming that the council website is still accurate, the code of process in relation to items which have already been voted on. And remember, this item and this planning application was refused at the last committee. And the only thing that could not happen at that meeting was sufficiently good enough reasons for the refusal. The procedure states, when the planning committee vote to refuse an application contrary to the recommendation of officers, the chair shall put to the meeting for approval a statement of the planning reasons for refusal of the application, which, if approved, shall be entered into the minutes of that meeting. Where the reason for refusal proposed by the chair is not approved by the meeting, or whether, in the chair's view, it is not then possible to formulate planning reasons for refusal, the application shall be deferred for further consideration at the next meeting of the committee. At the next meeting of the committee, the application shall be accompanied by a further written report from officers in which the officers shall advise on possible planning reasons for refusal and the evidence that would be available to substantiate those reasons. If the committee is still of the same view, then it shall again consider its reasons for refusing permission, which shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. What I fail to understand, and what most members of the public will fail to understand, why we have another full report before this committee where officers are recommending approval of the planning application, when the majority of planning members at the last meeting quite clearly indicated their refusal. So on that basis, and on the basis of the report before us, the officers have now given, in part of their report, the reason for the refusal. And I shall just quote those and recommend to this planning committee that you now approve those reasons for the refusal as you are being asked to do. The proposal would fail to provide an appropriate level of affordable housing to meet an identified local need within the borough. This would be contrary to policy BH5 of the Brent Local Plan 2019-2041 and policies H4, H5, and H6 of the London Plan. And the second issue, it relates to the scale. The proposed development, by reason of its scale, design, bulk, massing, and siting in relation to the suburban context of the site, would appear as an excessively dominant building, which would have a detrimental impact on the character of the surrounding area.
That is time, but we have it in front of us, so I think we can read exactly the final sentence you were due to say there. But we've got it right in front of us. We can read it, and I think we're very clear on the on your points there.